A reading from the Holy Gospel according to St. Matthew chapter 13 verses 36 to 43. Passage taken from the Message version of the Bible. Jesus dismissed the congregation and went into the house. His disciples came in and said, "Explain to us the story of the thistles in the field." So he explained, "The farmer who sows the pure seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world. The pure seeds are subjects of the kingdom. The thistles are subjects of the devil, and the enemy who sows them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age, the curtain of history. The harvest hands are angels." The picture of thistles pulled up and burned is a scene from the final act. The Son of Man will send his angels, weed out the thistles from his kingdom, pitch them in the trash, and be done with them. They are going to complain to high heaven, but nobody is going to listen. At the same time, ripe, holy lives will mature and adorn the kingdom of their Father. Are you listening to this? Really listening? The Gospel of the Lord. Reflections on the Gospel according to Matthew chapter 13 verses 36 to 43. The evangelist Matthew is introducing an application to the parables of Jesus. Jesus is back home with his disciples. The explanation is not given to the crowd but to his small group of disciples. When the scene moves from the original parable of the seeds and weeds to its explanation, there is a difference on the focus. When Jesus said the parable, the seed was understood as the values of the kingdom, and the weeds were the values of the world, of the evil one. But in the explanation, the seeds and the weeds are presented as good and bad people. And the judgment day, the end of the ages, says Matthew, the bad people will be thrown into the fiery furnace. Matthew goes on to explain the horrors that await the evildoers. There will be wailing and grinding of teeth. This explanation was the understanding of the early Christians, a catechesis addressed to the community of Matthew at the end of the first century. Probably after the first few decades of following the teachings of Jesus with great fervour, the Christians were a bit more relaxed and did not take their faith seriously. The evangelist attempts to shake them up using the language of the preachers of his time. To make himself understood by his Jewish listeners, he uses the style of other Jewish rabbis and uses images which were well understood by his people, such as fire, the fiery furnace, weeping, gnashing of teeth, the harvest, the angels, the devils. One thing is certain: whoever does evil ruins his life. But that judgment and punishment in the fiery furnace is not the work of God. St. Paul teaches us that God is the Father who wants all to be saved in the first letter to Timothy. Gospel according to John makes an absolute statement. He did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but through him the world is to be saved. And what about the fire? The only fire that God has is His Spirit that descended on the disciples during the Pentecost. The risen Lord has handed over the fire of His Spirit as a destructive force of sin. Remember the words of Jesus, "I have come to bring fire upon earth, and how I wish it were already kindled." We read it in the Gospel according to Luke chapter 12. It is the unstoppable flame that will burn all traces of weeds in the heart of every person, leaving only the good grain in each person. The fire of God, the Holy Spirit, will one day wipe out all forms of evil.